GDP for Georgia is expected to grow by 4.5% in 2021 and then by 5.5% in 2022. The main driver of the overall economy for EBRD is still a revival of the hospitality sector, while major risks stem from the low pace of vaccination still in Georgia. Please elaborate a little bit more on this.
Well, we already see recovery in the Georgian economy from the second quarter of this year, and we expect this to continue during the year and also to have some impact in the next year. We see hospitality sector as very important for Georgia, having in mind the significant share it has in the economy. And we think the pace of recovery could be shaped by the hospitality sector and how fast it will return to the previous path. On the other side, we see still significant risks, not just in Georgia, but in general for the region of Eastern Europe and Caucasus, because of the slow rate of vaccination. This is of significant importance, having in mind that COVID is still not eliminated. And we already see in many countries of Europe the new Delta variant, which if spreads to this region, we could see in the autumn a new wave of COVID, which would have negative implications on economic growth and recovery. Usually the high level of people with COVID disease leads to partial or full lockdowns, closures of many parts of the economy, especially the service one, and this certainly would disrupt the recovery.
Can we say that for the economies in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus, more broadly, the main downside risk, so to say, is the low pace of vaccination? Because when we look at other regions, we see that the growth prospects are the lowest for this region.
Yes, low level of vaccination is a significant risk factor for the recovery stage. However, when we are talking about the forecast and when we compare with other regions, as you mentioned, it's visible that in our region we have, let's say, figures that are a bit weaker than for other countries and regions. There are basically two factors about it. The first factor is that the three largest economies in this region, which are Ukraine, Belarus, and Azerbaijan, they all face significant structural impediments that were present even before the pandemic, and because of that, they have quite moderate growth rates. Even before the pandemic, their growth rates were between 1% and 3%, not higher than that. And these three economies certainly drive the average growth rate of the region. On the other side, the second reason, which is quite important and affects some of smaller economies in this region, is what happened last year and beginning of this year. Last year we had a war between two of these countries. Then we had political volatility in some others like Armenia, Georgia, Moldova. Fortunately, in Georgia, we see this is behind us, and we hope that after elections in Armenia, political situation will settle and will not disturb the economic growth further.
The picture is much broader than just economy, right? When we're talking about the hospitality sector in Georgia and its big share in GDP growth, but on the other hand, we see that the main risk, not only for Georgia, but for this region, for the immediate region, for Georgia, is low pace of vaccination. What is EBRD's take on the current current decision of Georgian government to open, for example, the land borders?
Well, it's quite a difficult decision to take, and I don't envy the government that has to take such decision, because here they have to weigh between the health issues and economic issues. And I believe they do the right decision. Opening of the economy and opening of the tourism, which is probably the most important sector for Georgian economy, is necessary.
I'm asking this question because looking at other countries whose regulations have become exemplary for Georgia as well, they have been quite cautious about lifting these regulations. Most of them, they didn't lift these regulations until I don't know, for example, Israel, US, many other countries, many countries in Europe, after reaching certain point of vaccinated population.
Certainly with appropriate health precautionary measures, it's possible to open tourism for guests from abroad with request of appropriate certificates that people who arrive are vaccinated, or with tests taken that they are not bearing the COVID virus. Tourism will certainly not recover fully to the pre-pandemic levels. It will take a few years to come to that point. However, the other sectors will contribute significantly to this recovery. However, we still don't think that recovery could be very strong. 4.5% is, I would say, moderate for Georgia, but at this point of time, we think this is realistic.
Let me tell you some recent statistics for Georgia's economic growth that have been published by Geostat. Estimated real gross domestic product growth rate in May 2021, it was 25.8% year on year and 11.5% in January, May of 2021 year on year. Government says that these numbers give the solid ground for Georgia to have two-digit economic growth in 2021. Given what we have analyzed so far, do you think that's realistic?
Yes, these figures that you mentioned and that we have seen are quite impressive and show that obviously economic activity is getting speed. However, we still don't have much details about about the drivers of this growth, because these are first estimates that are based on some indirect indicators. It would be important to see in which sectors is created this growth, which are the drivers, in order to get to a more pronounced conclusion about the outcome for this year. And certainly, second quarter of the year is something. The high growth rate in the second quarter of this year was expected because of the fact that last year the second quarter was the
baseline
point in the contraction. So the baseline works here. But we expect in the third and fourth quarter these growth rates to moderate significantly. However, as I will mention again, uncertainty is very high, and I would be curious to look at first data about the drivers of this growth and which sectors are actually leading this recovery.
This report makes focus on high inflation and high inflation, which is also followed by the tightened monetary policy in Georgia. What is the impact of this approach to the economic growth? Because we hear sometimes conflicting analysis of this policy that NBG is maintaining. What is EBRD's take on that?
Inflation is something that should be watched closely in this period. We see first that there are some temporary impact on prices, and these are connected to base effect. As you mentioned previously, base effect plays a role not just in the growth, but also in the inflation. Last year, at this period of time, prices were quite depressed, and now in the recovery, obviously, there is some growth compared to that period. Another factor that is important and that influence higher inflation at the moment are rising commodity prices, especially of the basic food products. And this is causing some troubles in countries where food is having a higher share in the consumer basket. However, these are effects that usually economists say are transitory, so they will expire at the end of the year. We should also look quite cautiously on some other factors like supply constraints. We have to bear in mind demand factors. On global level, it's estimated that fiscal stimulus accounted to about 20% of global GDP. This is a significant amount. Okay, it was necessary in this period to smooth the recession in the world, but this could be winded down gradually because it will have impact on the inflation. I believe this is also something that NBG is analyzing. And we have full confidence in the professionalism of NBG. We are confident that they are doing the right thing and they will succeed to keep inflation under control.
Great that you mentioned the fiscal stimulus and subsidies. We heard about the contours, so to say, of 10-year plan that was presented by the Prime Minister of Georgia. And there still we see that a lot of types of subsidies are there in this plan. My question is simple: can the economy that is largely dependent on subsidies and debt be sustainable in the long run?
Your observation is quite good. Obviously, as economies are developing, they should be less dependent on external financing. And to achieve that level, it is necessary to create domestic productive potential and increase exports. Georgia still has a significant current account deficit in balance of payment, and the only way to reduce this is to increase export capacities. The example that Georgia achieved and success that it achieved in tourism is now bringing around 20% of GDP inflow of foreign currency, should be followed by some other sectors. Georgia could develop some other export services sectors. IT is one potential, and also manufacturing. Georgia still lacks in export of manufacturing products. There are opportunities, especially after the pandemic. We see that the European Union is now talking and starting to do something in moving the global supply chains closer to Europe. This could be a chance, not just for Georgia, but for many countries in the EU neighborhood.
What about FDI? Where does FDI fit in this picture that you already that you are just referring to, because FDI for Georgia means not only investment, but also it means know-how, it means skills, it means a lot of like added value that FDI could bring to the country. And you know that the Prime Minister recently appointed Mr. Hudak, Basil Hudak, as his advisor on attracting FDI. Basil Hudak was EIB's former vice president of EIB. Should attracting FDI be a distinctive, so to say, goal of the government going forward?
Definitely it should, exactly for the reasons that you mentioned in your question. FDIs are not bringing just foreign capital, which is necessary at this period to cover the high external deficits, but also it brings know-how, it brings different work ethics, it brings contemporary work standards, and all this could contribute to Georgian economy. These FDIs, as I mentioned also in the previous question, should focus to significant extent to attracting new producers in the manufacturing sector, to enter into this trend of moving the global supply chains closer to Europe. And also it's very important, these FDIs to be connected more to domestic economy. So some activities has to be taken in the direction of creating a good environment, ecosystem of foreign companies to satisfy their needs by supplying on domestic companies as much as it is possible. This will contribute also to the development of domestic enterprises and domestic industry.
Sir, now listening to you and thinking of what is the new agenda of not only of EBRD, but the whole IFI community looking into the post-pandemic world, and that is like green growth, inclusive growth, more sustainable development, right? These are the new goals that are on the table for the world, as identified by IFIs. On the other hand, we know what are some of the major challenges for Georgia's economy, and that's court system, that's education system, all of that. Do you think this focus of the new agenda for the post-pandemic world is relevant for Georgia's current challenges?
Definitely it is. We know that Georgia features quite well compared with the region in terms of governance, in terms of efficiency of judiciary, anti-corruption, and all these areas. But if we compare Georgia with more advanced transition economies, those who are already members of European Union, Georgia is lagging behind. And this should be the target of Georgia, to improve its internal environment on the level that has Poland, Czech Republic, Baltics, and then to become more attractive for foreign investors. Actually, that would create a good environment, good investment climate, and could be crucial for attracting the multinationals in this global shift of supply chains. Green energy is something that could be significant advantage for Georgia. We know that it dominates Georgian production of electricity. More efforts in this direction, especially in solar and wind, could make Georgia more competitive, having in mind that EU is already thinking about introducing some import tariffs based on the compliance with carbon dioxide emissions. Green and digital agenda are something that is very important going forward. The focus will be there. Digital proved to be a crucial element in such circumstances as we lived through in the previous year. And renewables is something that is already here, and the future is there.